heard this quote once that was, be fearless in the pursuit of the thing that lights your soul on fire. It didn't kind of always like land because I was like, oh, fearless. Like I said, I was fearful for 10 years. Like I was like, hang on, like I don't know that being fearless is entirely realistic. And so fear is going to pop up anytime you're on the edge of your comfort zone. So being fearless in the pursuit of the things that set your soul on fire isn't entirely realistic. But I love the idea of being relentless in the pursuit of the things that set your soul on fire.
Hi, I'm Natasha.
And I'm Penny.
And welcome back to the WIBs. Today we have the incredible Ash Ormond. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome. We are so excited. I was actually just before we pressed record saying that I just absolutely love being a loyal follower. I think your Instagram is just incredible. You're just so full of positivity, and every single thing is just so real and relatable. So thank you. You definitely give us a lot.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here too, by the way, Gal.
Yeah. So tell us a bit, for people who are hearing you for the first time, who are you? What's your story?
That's a big question. So I'm Ash. I am always joking that I wear many, many hats. It's always really hard to describe like who I am or what I do. My background's in physio, so I suppose like for many years, for the past decade really, I've sort of always been like, hi, I'm Ash, I'm a physio is what I'm so used to saying. But I am also a business owner. I am a community builder. I'm a content creator. I'm a writer. I do lots of things, always many hats.
You're doing it all at like 100%, mind you. Because I feel like when people talk through their roles, they're like slashy kind of roles.
Yeah.
It's like maybe I'll do a little bit of this and that, but you seem like you're going at like full pelt at all of those things that you mentioned, which is incredible.
I don't know that I know how to not do full pelt. Like they have one speed and that is it. But yes, it's good. I thrive off doing all of the things until I don't and hit repeated episodes of Burnout, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. I guess, we'll definitely get into that, because I think that a lot of people, including myself, I've spoken about it openly many a time, is just how, you can be it's so lovely to be such an fun, ambitious person and just want to like get every single inch of life that you can. But then on the other side, there's also the kind of downside to that as well, which I think is important to talk about. Have you always seen yourself juggling different roles? Has it always been a part of you and what you've done?
It's a great question. I think it has always been a part of me. I don't know that's ever something that I like actively set out to do with any kind of intention. I was late diagnosed ADHD last year, and I think that puts a lot of things into perspective. And looking back, I know a big part of the diagnostic process was the psychiatrist had to call my mum. And I remember mum sort of was like, oh, what am I going to talk to her about? I don't know anything about ADHD. I was like, that's the point. You're not meant to know what the answers are. Just like tell her what you know. And I believe she went through a whole lot of like, oh yes, she was always attracted to like the shiny things and like was always, bouncing around from thing to thing, and we couldn't pin her down onto any one thing, and was always in every extracurricular activity and everything from sport to drama to like music to everything, like always so spread out across every possible thing that I could get my hands on. So I think that's just always just been something, whether that's innate, whether that's ADHD, who knows, but that's definitely just always been me.
Yeah, and I think it's important. Like I think I'm hearing so often, especially in that business ownership, entrepreneurship, or really driven women in particular that are getting that late diagnosis of ADHD. It's so common right now, and I actually really love that you shared that with your mum as well, because it is sometimes really hard to talk about, especially with, parents that lived in a very different generation to us, where it's quite, it's very accepted and, everyone's very, welcoming, but I think it's just a different generation when you talk to them about it.
Yeah, 100%. I think I'm very blessed in fact that, A, my parents are incredibly supportive, but B, my mum is on TikTok. So I think as I started sending her more TikTok, she kind of like started to see it. And then we hit the inevitable like, oh, I think she's also undiagnosed ADHD. And the psychiatrist was like, yes, I think from the sounds of your family, they all are probably. But it was classic when I was going through the big list of all the things that I thought, when I went about the diagnostic process. I sort of had this big list on my phone. I remember reading it out to my family one night. We were sitting around the dinner table. I was like, here's all the things that I think. Like, oh, no, everyone does that. Everyone does that. I'm like, no. We all do that.
We've normalized it.
We're all the same. It's genetic. And to your point of, ADHD being really, I suppose, prevalent in entrepreneurs and business owners, there's I've forgotten her name, but Instagram handles like the ADHD entrepreneur. And the stat that I heard there was that it was like over 7 ADHD people with ADHD are over 700 times more likely to be entrepreneurs, something along those lines. So I don't know where that stat comes from or like how accurate it is, but I mean, that just, I think, really resonates. And I think, you think what is entrepreneurship, and it's like being able to sort of be adaptable and, ping-ponging or popcorning your ideas around a bunch of different things and multitasking. And, there's obviously lots of downsides to that as well. And I'm sure we'll get into that too in terms of having ADHD and trying to run a business and manage all of these different things. But I think there's definitely traits of ADHD that lean into the entrepreneur or the business owner life.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk, like, speaking of popcorning, Hype Girl Social Club, which is, I think, one of the things that you do in terms of your career that you're most well known for. How did it come to be? What is it for people who don't know? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, that was very much another popcorn idea. It came about, I was quite literally on a walk with a friend one day. We just walked and got coffee. That was our little lockdown tradition that we sort of kept up. And I remember it was sort of 2023 and we'd sort of come off the back of the pandemic and these really big lockdowns here in Melbourne. And I was working as a physio, so I was doing a lot of telehealth and lots of like online stuff. And I was really craving just more in-person connection. And I think 2022 hit this massive period of burnout just off the back of the pandemic because we all went from 0 to 200. It was like trying to make up for lost time and, but we were still kind of living in this weird world where there was still lots of online stuff and people were working from home and I was doing lots of telehealth and it's like, I just want more in-person connection and lots of run clubs were popping up. And I remember having this conversation on this hot girl walk with my friend and I was like, it kind of hit me. I was like, oh my God, women either walk by themselves or with one other friend and that is it. Other than that, there's like no other. If you don't run, where do you go? We have Pilates classes and gyms, but, often everyone sits at the start of class really quietly and awkwardly on their reformer because no one wants to talk to each other. It's probably really early in the morning too and you don't really want to like socialize that time. And it's really separated. Everyone's got like a meter quite literally apart on their own little bed. And I do run, but I can't run and talk at the same time. So how do you like connect in those sort of situations? And they're also intimidating in the sense of, what if everyone's faster than me and I'm at the back? So I just kind of had this like very spur of the moment idea. I remember I sort of verbalized it on that walk and it was just one of those things that I just couldn't get out of my brain. I got home and I was like, I'm just actually, it was like an itch I need to scratch. I was like, this like, I feel like I'm feeling really excited by this popcorn idea. I threw it up on Instagram. I was like, little poll. I was like, hey, like, this is a thing. Like, if I did a little walk, we just got coffee and we went for a walk as a group of girls, like, who would be interested? And it was like heaps of people that responded. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll do it. I'll just throw it up.
Were they people you knew or just?
People that were like following me. I think through the pandemic, I'd built a bit of an online community just through, I was doing a lot of women's health sort of physio content at the time. And so some people I knew, but a lot of the time just people that followed me. And there were heaps of people that said yes. So I made a little Instagram account and I mocked up a little logo on Canva, which is still our logo today, which is wild because I am colorblind. I don't know who let me have free access to Canva.
It's bright, it's colorful, it's good.
I mocked that up and popped it up on Instagram. And I remember the night before, I think it was like the Instagram was maybe up for a week and I threw a few teaser posts up there. And the night before the first ever walk, I put it up on TikTok and it was, again, just very much me out for a walk and be like, hey, if you live in Melbourne and you want something to do this weekend, come along to this walk. And I woke up the next day and that video had 47,000 views and I think about 400 saves. And I panicked. I was like, what? Oh my God, what if 400 people show up to this walk? Thankfully they didn't. I actually don't know what it would have done if 400 people showed up, but 17 did. And most of those were people that just saw the TikTok the night before. And I quite literally had I organized a friend to meet me so that if no one showed up, I wouldn't cry. Be walking alone because I genuinely didn't think anyone would show up and we had
17's huge
17 for that first one. That people just like trusted me, like this random girl on the internet that they saw and like, I'll go to this walk. And I'm so proud of those women that showed up because I know just how scary that is to show up somewhere unfamiliar with someone you don't know or a bunch of people you don't know in probably an unfamiliar environment. And but they've made it what it is today because they showed up and they kept showing up and they keep showing up and it just kind of grew from there.
So what has it turned into today? So like it started off with like, these walks that you would do with these women, but what has it evolved into?
Yeah, so it started very much just this little walk club. And I think within about 2 months, we had a lot of familiar faces starting to come back. And I think pretty quickly I realized, initially I sort of marketed it as come to this walk to make a friend. So that was kind of the whole premise. And I still say that a lot, I think, because people resonate with that. They kind of understand what making friendship is and why they need it. But I think pretty quickly when we were having a lot of familiar faces coming back, you know, it wasn't necessarily just about coming, making a friend and never coming back. It was just coming to be part of this thing. And I think that's where it really started to turn into more of a community than just a walking club or just a group of people that sort of met and came to make friends and never came back. And so they were like, we just want more opportunities to hang out. We just want more events. And I was a physio. I was not an event planner. The only event I'd ever planned was my wedding. But I did joke in that lead up that I was like, I think I missed my calling as an event planner. I loved it. So I just started putting on events. And our first official event, we did a little picnic brunch. And then we had a Taylor Swift paint and sip. And that was like by far one of the most fun events that we have done to this day. Everyone was singing along the All Too Well 10-minute version, screaming at the top of the lungs. It was epic. But yeah, I just kept going, and it's, I suppose, like that's what it's evolved into today, a community of thousands of women. It's really hard to track how many. We've got like maybe just under 5,000 in the Facebook community. But then Instagram's got 17,000. We've got like another 6,000 on TikTok. It's hard to say how many of those sort of cross over, but I just generally will say it's a community of thousands that I was running as a side hustle up until June this year.
Wow. Up until June.
Yeah.
That's exciting. That's awesome. I think it's a real testament to you in how you're able to get people. Because I think you're completely right when you said the COVID shift. Like I think everyone kind of forgot how to socialize to an extent. Like I know that like even the most extroverted extroverts can feel really uncomfortable, and actually to go to a place where you're around strangers is really, really overwhelming. So it's a testament to you and your ability to build those connections, parasocial connections essentially, where they feel like they can trust you. How can you be, you know, you show up so authentically yourself online, like that is, you are who you are, and that translates into the community you've built, obviously. Like you've got a huge community of people that trust you enough without meeting you to show up on their own to a park. Like that alone is like, whoa. How did you get yourself to that point?
It's a really great question. I remember back in uni, and we were talking off mic about how I went to all the open days for uni for journalism and media and somehow kind of fell into physio. And I remember feeling like a fish out of water in physio because I got into it because I just love people. And I remember all of my uni placements, all of the feedback was like your clinical skills need some work, but your like communication, rapport building, like your people skills, top notch. Like don't need to work on those. So I think I've always had this just really, and maybe that is ADHD and just the ability to sort of mask or chameleon myself to, you know, match any person's personality that I meet. But I've always had this ability just to, I love meeting people. I love bringing people together. I love connection. It's one of my biggest values. And I think that has always sort of shone through in everything that I do, you know, everything down to what gym I choose to go to because they like remember my name at the door, or I feel connected to it, or, you know, what coffee place, what cafe I go to because the barista kind of remembers my order. Like connection and belonging are like just at the heart of everything that I do. So part of it I think is innate. Part of it I think is definitely a choice that I make. And I think that came from when I first started creating content online. It's scary, right? It's terrifying to like film yourself. You feel awkward. Like it's, you know, you watch it back and you absolutely cringe. And I think when I started putting out content and I got past that first hurdle of just putting stuff out on the internet, I think getting that real-time feedback of people being like, oh, we love this. We love you being real or raw or vulnerable or whatnot. I think just that positive reinforcement of like, oh, okay, like when I am myself and I show up as myself, I can connect with these people online better. And that's what I was seeing in my real life in physio, and when I, you know, gave little bits of myself away and wasn't just this sort of brick wall that people came to meet, and make a better connection. So I think through a few different things, I like over time, like I said, part of it's innate and then part of it's just learned, and then part of it's a conscious choice too.
Yeah. And I agree with what you say around that, you know, that connection part always being a part of what you do. And you're right, like it could have something to do with that whole ADHD, you know, what you said about masking. Just to go back to that quickly, because I'm really interested in it, and I think, you know, a lot of listeners would be as well, because I think a lot of people are in that like, you know, do I have it? Do I not? How do I talk about it? Whilst it's more widely accepted now, it's not completely. And I think what you mentioned earlier is incredibly common. I think everybody who's ever thought that they might have ADHD has experienced someone saying, oh, but everyone's like that, or you've all got that, or that's just normal, or whatever. Like there's always, you know, I think because it is becoming more common because it is just the nature of, our
like
lives.
you're too high functioning to be, classified as that. I think that's what people get a lot. The idea of like, oh well, no, because you're really successful and you've done all these, and you went to uni and you were good at school and you did all this, that you couldn't possibly have it.
How did you feel when you got the diagnosis? Like when it was actually on paper and you're like, wow, this is actually a thing. How did you feel?
It's a great question. And to your point of, everyone saying that it's, everyone has it or whatnot. I think there was a book by Matilda Bosley, I believe is her name, unless I've completely butchered that. But it's called The Year I Met My Brain. And that was a life-changing book I highly recommend for anyone who thinks they might have ADHD, has just been diagnosed with ADHD, has someone in their life that's been diagnosed with ADHD or that they think might have ADHD. It's just a really great, helpful book. It's sort of, the first half talks a lot about the stats and the second half is a lot of like strategies. And a big thing she mentioned in that is that the stats haven't actually really changed. It's just that we had this really big gap in the diagnosis of women, because when we look back at the research, as we know, there's very limited research done on women and women's health in general. It doesn't get funded. And that's because, one of my best friends is doing her PhD in women's health research, and particularly on the menstrual cycle, and she gives me a lot of insider information on like how that industry works. And a lot of it's to do with the fact that in studies they need the subjects to be quite controllable in the sense that they need to be able to control variables, and women's hormones aren't very controllable. Like they're all over the place. And so it makes tracking things really hard. And so it's this big like multi-systemic thing that ultimately ends up meaning that women don't get studied. And so when you look back at, say, like I think it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the people that were being studied were little boys with hyperactive ADHD. And it wasn't until, I'm going to say it was, I think only less than a decade ago, that women were actually included in ADHD research. And so I think what we're finding is that the stats haven't changed, the prevalence hasn't changed. It's just that we're suddenly getting a lot more awareness of it. People are talking about it. The likes of social media, there's obviously been a rise of it. Social media is a funny thing. My hot take is that I think for all the reasons we mentioned, that ADHD is kind of going to entrepreneurship, content creation is a perfect place for anyone with ADHD. It's dopamine. It's like, short form content. It's you get to perform and mask and chameleon yourself, and, you do it on your own terms, so you can be flexible with it. There's so many things that would draw someone with ADHD to content creation. So you've created this little online capsule of just like a little pool of the same people being like, oh yeah, and I think that's what we saw in the pandemic. It's like this app with this platform of all of the same people with all the same traits that have landed into this thing, and then suddenly like, I got ADHD. Oh, I do that too. Maybe I have ADHD. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of what we're seeing. And so it's not that everyone has ADHD, it's just that a lot of ADHD people tend to flock together, and so it kind of becomes this domino effect of one person in the friendship group gets diagnosed, and suddenly everyone in the friendship group, and it's not until you kind of step out of that friendship group and hang out with people that are like very neurotypical, you're like, oh yeah, there's a difference, right? So to the point of like sort of how I felt when I got diagnosed, I think because I'd had such a long wait to get into the psychiatrist. So by the time I actually got my appointment with the psychiatrist, probably like a year after I started thinking that I might have had it. And so by the time I actually got there, I was expecting it to be this really big thing. And it was kind of just like, oh, like validation. I think it was just like, oh, okay, like I have ADHD, and it wasn't really like a big deal for me. And whether that's, I think for me, because I was at the time working with a lot of people with neurodivergence, and so I'd been around it a long time, it was a very normal conversation. It was a lot of the strategies I was implementing in my everyday life, a lot of the strategies are things that people that are neurotypical can benefit from as well. So I don't think that it was like this really big thing for me in particular. A lot of people speak to, I know that's not everyone's experience, a lot of people speak to it feeling a lot of grief with that, and there's an element of that, but I think for me, whether it's because I had supportive family or just a family that allowed me to do the things that I wanted to do and let me popcorn around and bounce around with different things. So in many ways it served me probably more than it hindered me. But there's absolutely things looking back in all my high school reports of Ashley has so much potential if only she would like focus, or Ashley would be so great if she just stopped distracting others, or Ashley would do so much better if she actually just got her homework done. And you internalize those messages for sure. So there's downsides, and there's an element of grief with that. But I think the validation for me personally, my experience was the validation of being like, oh, okay, that helps just explain a lot of things that I kind of already knew. was really, I think, far bigger, sort of outweighed the grief that I felt. Because I think
a sense of relief.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think knowing what I know about the stats of, women weren't even included in the research. So how would my teachers know? How would my parents know? Like it wasn't a conversation. So like, yeah, I grieve, if I knew these things, then maybe the things might have been different. But then I also might not have Hype Girl Social Club, and I might not be where I am today, and I might have gone into journalism and done something different if I didn't forget to write that essay that meant that I couldn't do that course. You know what I mean? So there's
it's a superpower.
Right,
It's turned into, your superpower. It's what makes you unique. What makes you, that special person that can do all these things. It's actually quite nice that we're changing the conversation around an ADHD diagnosis. It's not, there's a lot of stigma around people that are getting those diagnoses to, get medicated and do all those things. And absolutely, like that, by all means, like I've got no opinion on that. Everyone's got their own journey, and I can't speak to whether someone's going to get medicated or not. But the best thing about the ADHD diagnosis and where we're taking it, and you're right, I didn't think of it like that in regards to the content creation, the fact that there's so many, the people that are diagnosed with are usually the ones with the loudest voices because they've got a voice now. They're like, yes, I've got it. They want to share it and whatnot. But I love how there is becoming a bit of a positive spin to it as well. It's like that is your superpower. It is something that is highly prevalent in successful people. So if you've got it, like utilize it, use it, work out. I love that book that you put forward as well. Like use that book and use these techniques to help guide you in different areas.
Yeah. Definitely. And I want to acknowledge that I know for a lot of people it's not a superpower, and it can feel absolutely like a disability. And again, like it's a spectrum, right? So there's going to be people who are really struggling with that. But I think for me, like I said, a lot of it comes down to support and the support I have around me. And I think being a health professional, having a lot of access to knowledge was a huge thing. Like I had access to all that knowledge well before I was diagnosed. I have basically a live-in body double. My husband is like the most organised person ever. He's the one that's like reminding me to text my friends or call them for their birthdays or make sure I put things away and am not super messy. And he does a lot of the house tidying and just literally is following me around tidying up all my doom piles. So, and I think without those things, without supportive family growing up, it would have been a really different story. So I acknowledge not everyone has that. And for some people it's not a superpower, but I do, to your point of like there are positive traits, and with the right support, with the right tools, the right strategies, whether that's like psychology and therapy or medication, whatever it might be, and other supports in your life, there's still going to be downsides, but you can harness some of those positive sides as well.
We've got access to that as well, I think, to your point, what you said earlier about the content. I think where the positive can be drawn from that situation is that there is access to how to, take the good out of something that isn't that great. You know what I mean? That's kind of like it's a silver lining that there's so much content around there now that's like, hey, you've got this. It's not the most positive thing in the world, but hey, this is some things that you can do with it, which I really appreciate. And even your voice, just talking about your experience and how you're talking about it now, I think it's incredibly powerful, and I think it's just something that I can definitely say, previous generations just wouldn't have even gone into even the difference between genders. Like you're completely right in what you said. Like when I used to think of ADHD, I would think of those very hyperactive boys that were in my primary school, right? And you'd know they were very hyperactive, and that's what that is. And that's kind of what you mentally kind of, this is what this is. But I love how you kind of spoke to that spectrum of it all, and the report cards. I think that's so relatable. I think that a lot of people can relate to that where, it shows up completely differently in different people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big thing.
You seem to have built your world even before you know it around that, maybe, leaning into a lifestyle that would work well for you and work well for your diagnosis, even if you didn't know it was happening. And I think that it makes sense when you kind of look back and say, okay, I've got Hype Girl and, I'm doing physio and I'm jumping in over here and I'm doing this over there. It almost like you've built a life around it so it can accommodate the type of person that you are, which is entrepreneurial, which is engaged and excited to try and jump into new things all the time, which is incredible.
Yeah. And I think yes, I have very recently. And I've been through this big journey because I only finished up physio work, like I said, in June. So what's that, 2 months ago, maybe less than. And I've been a physio for almost 10 years. I graduated in 2015. And like I said, I fell into it. It wasn't ever really something I set out to do. In fact, I did my year 10 workplace experience, work experience in physio, and decided I hated it and was never going to do that. And somehow I still ended up there. And it's only just now that I've stepped away from it for the first time and taken that really big, scary leap of faith that I've realized I really was stuck in something because I felt like I had to that I should because I'd spent all this money and time studying it. And there's such a, identity piece that comes around with like, I'm a physio, and you tell people I'm a physio and everyone kind of knows what that is. And they're like, oh, like, can you tell me about my shoulder or whatever it might be? I'm like, that's not what I do. But, I think there was this really big period of my life, this chunk of my life that I was in something that I kind of knew. I reckon looking back, I think within 12 months knew that physio wasn't the end game for me, that it, like I said, I felt like a fish out of water. I got into it just because I kind of liked people, and that was the side of it that I loved. And I like felt like all my colleagues were really into the science and the data and the biomechanics and the research. And I was like, just tell me like what's right and what's not, and then let me like talk to people and hang out with them all day. So I fell into it, and I stayed in it because I felt like I had to, and I felt like I owed something to that. And now that I'm finally out of it, to your point of sort of building a life around, what suits me is like, I think I always felt this like pull towards this more entrepreneurial life, or just like this pull towards something bigger and greater and outside of this one little four-walled treatment room that I was sort of stuck in. But fear held me back for a solid decade. And I spent, somewhere in the pandemic, I went and did a life coaching course because the world was ending and I had lots of time in my hands. And I did it quite literally because I was like, I need some more communication skills. The population I was working with, I felt like I needed more communication skills. And so I did it, and I hit this like mindset chapter, and I remember totally falling in love with the whole idea of mindset coaching. And so then I worked with a bunch of women, in whether they were health professionals or not, helping them overcome their fears to quit their job or chase their dreams. And I always felt this like such an imposter, because I was like, well, here I am like helping you do the thing that I'm like really quietly dreaming that I could do. I'm going to get emotional talking about it, because I feel like it's been this really big thing, I think, for a decade, where I've known I wanted to get out. I've known this, that I was built for something more. And I think fear just like held me back for so long. Like I felt like I had to, I was scared. My family, my friends, my partner, everyone has this really, like my partner's a firefighter, and, everyone's in really stable career jobs. And, the thought of quitting something stable like healthcare and chasing my dreams felt too whimsical. And, I think that I'm really excited and proud that I finally did it. It's freaking terrifying still, and I still don't really know how to pay myself, and I'm still working a lot of things out. But yeah, I think that it's been really scary, but probably one of the most worthwhile things I've finally done.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know it can feel scary and hard sometimes, but I think that it's also something obviously you're really passionate about, and it's a beautiful thing because you're being able to go and, live in this really authentic version of yourself. And I think that we talk about a lot on the podcast, the idea of imposter syndrome and what it holds us back from doing in our lives, whether it be in our careers, whether it be in the people that we want to meet, or the dreams that we want to chase down for us, even outside of work, for an outlet. So I think that even though, it seems like a thing that happens in a vacuum for yourself, you have no idea, like, by sharing a story like that, how many people that would help to be able to go and do something for themselves like that in their life, whatever it is that they're sort of, dreaming of, and maybe feels a bit too like fluffy or insane in that moment, to be able to go and be chasing it down in the face of stability and, routine and rigidness. Because I think our whole lives, especially at least the life that I grew up in, it was like you have to go and do these things and hit these boxes, and then once you do that, then you're set, and that's your routine, that's your path in life, and don't deviate. But I think that the older that I'm getting, and the more that I'm exposed to people like yourself, there is so much richness in being able to step away from the path and being able to go after the thing that really lights you up inside. And obviously with what you're doing, especially with Hype Girl and all of the content that you're creating, it's something that, you can see it in your face when you speak to it. It brings you a lot of joy.
And I think I'd say that because I know, like I said, it's something I dreamed about for so long. You're so right, like deviating from the path is so hard. Like I was absolutely the same. It was like the path was finish school, go to uni, get a job, buy a house, have a family, settle down. Like that was the path that was kind of outlined for me. And I've never been much of a path follower. In fact, I'm quite literally the person, and it drives my husband nuts when we travel, because I'll see this random alleyway that I'm like, oh, let's go explore down there. He's like, let's not go explore down there. And I will get us lost because I'll take us quite literally off the path. That is like absolutely who I am. But I tell that story because I think I've had so many people, particularly in the last couple of months since finally quitting my job, and message me and say, wow, it looks like you're really like kicking goals, or like how incredible. And I'm like, this took me 10 years to, like, this wasn't an overnight decision. And I think for me, I would look at other people who are running their own business and be like, how are they that brave? Like, how are they just out here quitting their jobs and following their dreams? Like, I couldn't understand how people could just go and do that. And I would have this voice in my head that, like I said, it was like this pull to do it, but just fear was absolutely the thing that held me back. And I just want to acknowledge that it's hard. Like, it's bloody hard. It's bloody scary. And I think everyone kind of has to come to that in their own time. And for me, that felt like creating a bit of a safety net before I took the leap. I know there's plenty of other entrepreneurs that just blindly take the leap. And I think, as any business owner will know, you have to be comfortable with a certain level of smart risk. I am comfortable with no risk. Like that is the level of risk that I am generally comfortable with, just no risk at all. So that's why I ran Hype Girl Social Club as probably like a side hustle for about 18 months before I finally was like, and it wasn't even a bravery thing, or it was quite literally I had the busiest 6 months of my life. I was rapidly burning out and I was not doing anything well because I was so spread thin. It was just a matter of need rather than choice. But it's scary and it takes time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I absolutely love that you mentioned that. And, we've spoken to a lot of different entrepreneurs, right? And women entrepreneurs in particular. And everyone's got their story and everyone's got their reason for quitting. That quitting job moment is really pivotal. Like, it's the most pivotal moment, I think, for a lot of people, when it's like that sliding doors. Like, I could stay here, I'm here now, and what do I do next? And I think the message that you just said is so important, because it is hugely glamorized, the idea of I quit my job and now I'm going to start a business and I'm backing myself. And I think that's incredible. I think that is one of the bravest things that you can do. I respect that so much, but I also respect that it is hard, and there's almost like a mental back and forth that you have to go through, an internal back and forth. And regardless whether it took you years, months, whatever it took you, I think it's really special that you can talk to it, but you can talk to the good and the bad, because that's the reality of it. But I think, when you look at it, the good will outweigh the bad tenfold, because you've got a community of women that look to you and you're showing them that if you're not happy, you leave. And I think that is the most important message that any leader, regardless, woman, any leader should be able to show people that if you are not happy, you can leave. And that, to me, it's the hardest thing in the world. Like, I get goosebumps thinking about it, because that translates to every area in your life, relationships, careers, friendships, like every area of your life that can translate to. But business in particular kind of impacts all of those. It impacts you financially, it impacts your relationships, it impacts your friends. So it can be one of the hardest ones, but one of the ones that people don't really talk about, because they've got their career and they've got their thing, and you tie so much of your personality to that. Yeah, to who you are.
100%. And, speaking of deviating from the path and, sometimes feeling like, oh, it's too late to do that or whatever it might be. Someone told me recently that you can graduate a uni degree at 40 and still have a 30-year career. And I think that really kind of put things into perspective for me of like, it's definitely not too late to change careers or to change your mind or to do something different. People don't stay in careers for 40, 50 years anymore. And I think also the fact that how many of our 18-year-old decisions do we, trust and stick with as great life decisions, right? Probably not many. So why are we trusting this thing that we chose, probably based on some pretty poor career planning or counselling in high school, or something that our parents told us we should do, or something that a teacher said, oh, you'd be good at. That's kind of how I fell into physio. I was like, I like sport and I got injured, so I'll go do that as a career. But no one talks about the reality of that career.
Yeah, it's like, I think I picked journalism because I'm like, I watch Sex and the City. I'm like, you know what, that'll be.
I went to be Samantha, PR queen that walks around and has cocktails and does all the fun stuff.
I'm going to be a blogger. I'm going to work out of my apartment. I'm going to move to Sydney. I'm going to talk about mascara. But I think one thing I wanted to talk about, because touching on career, there's something that I've seen you mention when it comes to Hype Girl is the idea and something around the loneliness epidemic that we're experiencing at work. Because obviously you started this in the pandemic. There was a massive shift in terms of how we collaborate and how we connect with other people. And for a lot of people, after you get out of high school, after you're out of uni, the place that you get your connection, your relationships, and we talk about a lot on the podcast, is work. So why do you think, is that part of the magic of what Hype Girl is bringing to people, in a world that is really changing from a work perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I have so many people of all different ages, say to me, like, yeah, but everyone, like boys experience loneliness too, and people in their 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s all experience loneliness. I'm like, yeah, I know. The reason I've kept it mostly to 20s and 30s is absolutely not about age. It's purely because it's such that's where I am too. I feel like I'm not the person to run events for men or for people in their 40s or 50s or for mums, because that's not where I'm at in my life. I wouldn't know the first thing. On a complete side tangent, I had someone message me the other day about, like, would you think about organising like some walks for mums? And I was like, like, I would think about it for sure. And then I was chatting to my friend who is a mum, and she was talking through all these different considerations of like the location, because you've got to be able to like feed or change, or, if you're on the walk, you might have to stop so like someone can change their baby. And I was like, I know nothing. Like, I know nothing. I am not the person to be. I would probably put something on and everyone would show up and be like, this is the most chaotic organised event ever or unorganised event ever, because she's considered nothing, because I know nothing. Anyway, so my point is I focus specifically on women in their 20s and 30s because A, that's where I am. B, it's, I think, just this really big period of change to exactly what you mentioned. I speak a lot about community versus friendship, right? Because I think something that I learned, I remember being in my early 20s sitting on the floor. It's the saddest little scene. Sitting on the floor of my shower, sobbing my eyes out, quite literally, like hands, like knees curled up, fetal position, like arms wrapped around my knees, like sobbing my eyes out. And my partner sort of like popped his head in and was like, why are you crying? Like, what is wrong? And I was like, I have no friends. And I felt so sad. And the reality is that at the time I had friends. I had quite good friends. What I had lost was community. I'd moved out of home. I was in a workplace that was quite toxic, and I had friends at work, but I didn't feel like I really belonged at work because the environment wasn't particularly like psychologically safe. I'd moved out of home maybe like an hour away, but that was enough to sort of take me from community. I wasn't in touch with any of my high school friends anymore. I'd finished uni, and a lot of my uni friends were from interstate or overseas, and so they all started moving back home or traveling elsewhere or for work or whatnot. And so what I was missing at the time was community. And I think from a very young age, like kindergarten, everyone's like, who's your friends at kindy? You know what I mean? So we learn about friendship from a really young age. We know we need friends. We know how to make friends. We know that we need them. We know where to find them for the most part. And a lot of the time they're kind of just handed to us by circumstance, like just proximity. And what no one talks about, though, is community. No one says, like, who's your community, or, like, where do you belong? No one has that conversation. And that's why I said, with the walks, I still sort of say, like, we run friendship-making events, but that's because if I said we run community events, people would be like, I don't know what that is. Like, no one really knows what community is. We just know when we don't have it. But we think what we're missing is friendship. And I think in school we have community, like I said, just by circumstance. A lot of it's facilitated by our parents. They put us in sport or extracurricular activities, whether it's dance or theatre or like sporting clubs and just high school or school in general. We have a school community. University, we kind of start losing a little bit of that unless we sort of join clubs or certain things. And for me, I was in physio, and so my physio course in itself was like a bit of a little community. But when you leave those things, you kind of leave community behind, and you don't realize that you needed that because you didn't really actively seek it out. You just had it. And when it's gone, you're like, I feel lonely and kind of empty despite being surrounded by people, and you don't realize that what you're missing is community. And I think to your point of sort of being in your 20s or 30s and you've finished uni, you go to work, and depending on what your work is and your workplace or your career, that might be dominated by older people or people that aren't your age or your gender or whatever it might be, or people that just don't have the same interests as you. And maybe you're working online and you're not, working from home and you're not around people anymore. And again, people don't realize that the reason that they're feeling lonely or sad or empty or depressed or whatever it might be is like the lack of community. Because I've got friends, I don't understand why I still kind of feel a bit like just all the time. And I think that's where we sort of speak to, I like to speak to the fact that what I've realized is that we need friendship and community, and they serve two very different roles in our lives, where friendship is like reciprocal and it's, more of a one-on-one thing or maybe in a little friendship group, but they're the person that you sort of call in a time of need, and you can, relate to things and, they're there to support you, versus like community. It's not so reciprocal. There's no like direct energy exchange, but it just feels like you're belonging to something, like you're part of something bigger, and it's community that shows up for you when you are really having a hard time. They're the ones that will kind of rally around you because it feels like you've got this massive support of just this whole bunch of people that are there to kind of support you.
And it's almost like breakdown. I've never heard about it like that.
Yeah.
In the way that you've kind of broken them down.
I feel like it's like the contextual contextualness of like people understanding you on that level and like being where you are. Because I think that for me, like I've always seen there's a big difference. It's like the friends you catch up on, and you sort of have to let them know like, hey, this is where I'm at. Whereas the community kind of gets it because they're there and they're in amongst it daily.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in your 20s and 30s, like your friendships are probably all at really different life stages, and you can still maintain a really beautiful friendship. Like I said, my friend that I was speaking to had the baby, and she's in an entirely different stage of her life than what I'm in. But we can still, I just went up and visited her recently. She's up in New South Wales, and we still could spend a whole weekend together and, had a really great time. But, it's very different to the people that I want to go and do, go out to a wine bar or something with my friends after hours or something. Not to say she wouldn't love to do that, I'm sure too, but she can't at the moment. And so I think that's where having that friendship that I know I can depend on her and have these D&Ms and, really lean on her for one-on-one kind of support. But then also having this like group of community members that I know that I can, just go and do fun stuff with and be around, and know that we kind of have shared values and we're like-minded and we enjoy it, and we're not sort of sitting and D&Ming all the time. And sometimes some beautiful friendships come out of that too. But it's a very different energy exchange, I suppose.
I like that you can have that lightness as well. Like it is okay to have that lightness in that community and just have those people that you can kind of like debrief with and have a good chat with and talk about things that are kind of surface level at some point, but then have those people that you can go to for deeper and they can kind of come in and out. Now, I still have like 750 questions. Like I reckon,
I honestly, you're like, we'll chat for like 30 minutes. I was like, challenge accepted.
I honestly can't. Like I'm like in my head, I'm like, I want to know this, I want to know this.
In a part two.
But well, we will have a part two. But what we always like to end with, which I think is really important because, there's listeners of all different ages that listen to us. And I always think back to like myself, and you brought it up, which is a great segue. But yourself, fresh out of uni, and you've got these big eyes, and you're ready to go, and you have the whole world ahead of you, but not a lot of great advice. You've just got a lot of, people around you and a lot of opinions and a lot of things like that. So, I think one of the questions I'd like to end it on is like, what would be the biggest piece of advice you could give your fresh out of high school self?
I heard this quote once, or saw this quote once, that was, be fearless in the pursuit of the thing that lights your soul on fire. And I loved that, except it didn't kind of always like land, because I was like, fearless. Like I said, I was fearful for 10 years. Like I was like, hang on, like I don't know that being fearless is entirely realistic. And I think, to speak to the neuroscience of it for a second, we are all biologically hardwired with this inner critic, right? We think we're the only one with it, but everyone has one. It's actually a part of us. That's a whole other story. But, the point is that the fear is going to be there, right? Because we're biologically hardwired to stay safe, because that's what keeps us alive. And so fear is going to pop up anytime you're on the edge of your comfort zone. So being fearless in the pursuit of the things that set your soul on fire isn't entirely realistic. But I love the idea of being relentless in the pursuit of the things that set your soul on fire. And I think the thing, that I would tell my younger self is just exactly that, just be relentless. And I suppose like looking back, that's what I have done. I just have kept being like, okay, this isn't right, but I'm going to find something else. I'm just going to try 100 different things until something lands. And even when it does land, chances are I'll find something else 6 months later that I like want to chase instead. But I think that idea of just being like defiantly relentless in chasing the thing that lights you up would be the thing that I would say, because there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be fear, there's going to be hard times, and it's not going to be easy. But if you can just like keep showing up and do the thing that's scary and, be vulnerable or be a little bit cringe or whatever it might be, do the thing that sets your soul on fire and just keep showing up and keep doing it.
Ash, thank you so much.
Thank you. If you're obsessed as we are, what are the best handles to find you on?
Ash Lani Ormond at Ash Lani Ormond on Instagram and TikTok. We're joking off mic that I regret that handle every day because so many people think my name is Ash Lani. It's not. It's Ashley. My middle name is Lani. But that's where you can find me.
Okay, amazing.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. And thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please like it, share it, review it, send it to a friend. It would mean the world to us.
We'll see you next week.
See you then. Bye.